Welcome back to Shit Creek Survivors. We share real stories of people getting stuck up shit creek, the paddles they used to get out, and hope for anyone stuck up their own shit creek right now. Today's episode is a powerful one. Let me preface it with that. We're going to talk about something that a lot of people experience but don't always know how to put into words. What happens when a long-term relationship ends and you're left trying to rebuild your entire sense of identity. Our guest today, Heather, shares her journey through childhood trauma, emotional neglect, and a 24-year marriage that eventually came to an end. And what came after wasn't just grief, but a full midlife reinvention. We'll get into what healing actually looks like, not the highlighted version, but the real process of emotional work, responsibility, and learning how to move forward when life doesn't go the way you planned it. Let's get into it. Heather, thank you so much for being here on Shit Creek Survivors. If you would introduce yourself to our audience.
Hi, everybody. Thanks, Cam, so much for having me. It's a privilege to be here on Schitt's Creek. I have a few survival stories to share with you. I am a divorce coach and I help women reinvent their futures and recover from a very difficult process, which has been likened to death. And it
Right.
is a traumatic process to go through,
Mm,
but it's become my over 50 phase of my life. It's really become very meaningful and important to me. I worked in international diplomacy for nearly 30 years. I have
wow.
explored the world and always had that sense of wonder throughout my childhood. So that's one gift I've always had. So it's a privilege to be here. Thank you so much.
Yeah, that sounds fun. I got to travel a lot when I was a kid too. Every 3 years, we'd
Yeah,
move to
sure.
another place, and it was fun growing up for sure. But you go to a lot of schools for sure. Um, and Heather, I'm gonna have to ask, what shit creek are we talking about today?
I'll talk a little bit about my childhood and then my divorce.
Okay.
So I'll share kind of where I came from. To be clear, I am from a rural area in northern southern Wisconsin, but north of the US, of course. But
Okay.
I'm the only one in my whole family really who has a passport. So we didn't travel as kids. We barely left the state. But I always had that sense of adventure. And I just came from a family of a lot of addiction and mental illness. My parents got divorced when I was 5. My dad was an academic
Mhm.
and he had a drinking and drug addiction, which was never treated, and I think some mental illness. But my mom remarried immediately to a very emotionally abusive man that
Mm.
eventually, when she left the state due to her untreated bipolar condition, he won custody of my sisters and I. But what followed were years of really emotional neglect and abuse, threaded with a lot of outside tragedies. We had a lot of, I remember in 6th grade, my friend got hit by getting off the school bus, got hit by a semi
Oh
and,
god.
tragically was killed, and at home, we didn't talk about that at all, so
Mm.
that's the kind of neglect I'm talking about. No nurturing, no space to process any
Right.
tragedy. And, suicide was very prevalent in my life. 2 friends and then my mom's sister. Again, no talking, no processing, and we moved to a different state from my dad, who was a very kind, empathic person. But, I discovered through this some gifts that I had. also that I brought into my adulthood with me. And when I went off to college, I immediately ran to the therapy, like the counselor's office, and was like,
Yeah.
I think I came from a really messed up situation.
Yeah.
So,
Key word there is I think. Like you were
yeah,
so in it that you had an inkling,
yeah,
but it's what life was to you. And it's tough when you grow up in that because you have no idea what might be normal because you think you're living it.
exactly. And I had these clues, right? Like, I worked really hard. My sister and I worked at a dairy farm. Being in the dairy state, when we were like 13 and 14, and we had connection with other families. And
Mhm.
I would go and be like, oh, they have fresh bread. They laugh, like they talk.
Yeah.
Things that I was not seeing in my home.
Mhm.
And I called those like my connections to hope. And it was so meaningful to me as a kid to have those, to see that because I never forgot it. Like
Yeah.
it stuck with me and led to a lot of resilience later on. Like, I'm like, there's a world out there. It was just my glimpse into something else,
Yeah.
um, and gave me a lot of hope. And I felt like this intuition connection, like this isn't okay.
Yeah.
Because my mother was gone, my sisters and I were often in vulnerable situations, working at the dairy farm, or we eventually got jobs at McDonald's and just tried to make money to get clothes and other, necessities.
Yeah.
But we we were victims of sexual assault, physical assault, often just from being in the vulnerability, of not having, like, someone sort of watching over
Yeah.
us. With
I'm so
that being
sorry.
said, yeah, thank you. I processed it a lot later, but I had this feeling, this isn't okay.
Mhm.
And I don't know, my sisters and I don't talk a lot about what happened.
Yeah.
Um, I'm from a family that's very closed about these stories of our family. Um, but I I was became the family scapegoat because I would act out and speak out. I would stay out all night. I would sneak out. I would rebel in other ways, which now that I've had extensive therapy, I realize were calls for help, and
Yeah.
eventually became suicidal myself, um, as a four, 14 or 15-year-old kid,
Yeah.
because I had so much inside that I hadn't processed.
Yeah.
And yeah,
We talk a lot on here about the need to process the feelings and feel the
yeah.
feelings. But I can't imagine what it's like when you're never taught to do that because you
Mhm.
kind of replicate what you're witnessing. You know what I mean? So it's a new situation. You're looking at mom and dad. How are you responding to this? So I have a clue of how I'm supposed to respond to this. So it,
I am, yeah, exactly. When there's nobody, modeling that for you. And I am grateful that I had those early years with my biological father, who,
mhm,
even though he was a drinker and had the drinking and drug problem, he was an empathic, he was not abusive, and he
mhm,
was an authentic person. I saw kindness and I saw my mom's true character, which was very caring and loving. So that also has led me to really, that was my core, my first 4 years of life. There
Yeah.
was fighting and things, but there wasn't this cold, sort of unfeeling environment. So, yeah, I knew, and, and then I was able to get some help and really
Awesome.
move through this.
Yeah. What would you say since man, I'm so glad you went to the counselor's office. Not a lot of people take that step. And
Yeah.
so you were able to do that. Can you remember what might have been an early kind of like aha moment during those conversations where you're like, oh, like I was in the wrong place or that wasn't right.
Yeah, I definitely immediate attention was to the sexual assaults.
Yeah.
I'm still going to therapy for some of that because I had suppressed things that have
Yep.
come out since then. But that's easier to label for, let's say, if you go to someone and say, like, this happened, they say that's wrong. It was harder for me to define the cold, unfeeling processing of emotions.
Uh,
So when you and I first, started corresponding, that's I think I mentioned I finally have the vocabulary
yeah.
to describe what happened to me. And that is the emotional neglect. So that aha moment has come 30 years later.
Yeah.
Um, but yes, I had a lot of anxiety and depression stemming from these experiences.
For sure. I bet. And it's amazing how much we will avoid looking at these things, just
Absolutely.
hope they go away. And then finally 30 years later you look at it and the feeling's still there. It's until you
Yeah.
feel it, until you process it, and all of a
Mhm.
sudden you're like, "Whoa, like there's power to this processing thing. There's power to actually feeling the feeling instead of feeling like you're weak because you're feeling a feeling. It's like actually feel the feeling." I've said this many times on here. We had a guest on who had 10 plus strokes. Like you don't count any more strokes after 10. He's limited to his wheelchair. His mobility's severely limited. And I asked him, I go, what happens on your bad day when those feelings are coming and you can't go for a run and you can't get in the car and go for a drive and like all this kinds of stuff? He said, I let them wash over me. I feel every bit of them right when they need to be felt. And
Right.
that's what gets me through it. So instead of it lasting for 2 days, it may last for a couple hours. And it's gonna be a bummer, but I need to feel these feelings to get to the next place. And I was like, "Ugh." It's,
Yeah.
because I always thought, I'm like, "Well, my story is a little different. I gotta do this and this." And it's like, this guy's telling me straight up, "You gotta feel the feels." I'm like, I've heard that 10 times, but from a guy sitting in a wheelchair, I took
Yeah.
more notice, if you will. And so it's a scary thing to do is feel the feels, go back to those places where you were, but with the help, especially of a professional, it
Yes.
it's, it is a good process to go through, again, with a professional, with someone who's trained,
Absolutely.
someone you trust, and it doesn't happen overnight either. It's not like you walk into a therapist appointment and you just unload your whole life on them. If you're anything like me, the first 3 sessions, I guess I was almost paying to get to know this person because I wasn't gonna start slicing
Absolutely.
off. Yeah, I'm not gonna
To
slice
know
off
and
a
to trust.
exactly. So that's a little weird too. I understand because that's a big border for therapy and
Yeah.
counseling, but I get it. And that is the way the process works. You don't know this person. Why would you run in there and tell them everything about your life? Get to know them. And if there's something that kind of like is bothering you right here and there that another person could talk to you about, that's great. And again, it's so much better talking to a third person who's not a mandated reporter because you can say the things that you're not saying in front of the people who are immediately around you all the time. And then when you say it, it sounds more extreme out loud than it did in my thoughts. And I can almost
Yes.
self-correct then. I'm like, oh wow,
Right.
that seems kind of extreme now that I hear that
Right.
out loud. And you can kind of self-correct. So with the help of
Right.
therapy, it is, or with a professional, it is an amazing process. It can be a painful process, but it is a freeing process. So,
It is, and with that note, it's a lifelong process,
yeah,
and there's so many different areas of therapy,
yeah,
and like you said, Cam, with the professional, it's got to be absolutely a trusted professional, and
yeah,
it's part of your support network, and miracles can happen.
yeah. Yeah, it did for me. We actually did something called EMDR for quite a while. We still do it.
I did EMDR too.
Yeah, and that's a funny process at first. You're like, "You want me to do what?" And it's actually like this process where you're either watching something visually move from right to left,
Yes,
or it can be tones in your ear, right to left,
yes,
or you can
or it
even
can
do
tap
butterfly,
in.
yeah, the butterfly taps on
Yes,
the side. And, and it's really funny, but it works. It actually works, and if you go look online, you'll see top tier military personnel doing EMDR because it is the thing that works for them. Like, it's pretty amazing. So anyone out there, there's different, not only therapists, but different therapies, and then all these different things you can do in between. And you can also find community because you'll find out if you're looking for it, there are groups of people who are experience these same things who go to therapy, but also connect with a group of individuals who might be going through the same thing, which can be powerful, sometimes. But sometimes if you're like me, you're like, I'm this part of the road I'm doing alone. And then like I know that the next part of the road, I'm like, okay, I can do this as a pack or whatever it is. But anyways, I'll
right.
get off my box here. I want to hear about tell me about the divorce, if you would.
Yes, yes. So I was married 24 years.
Okay.
We unexpectedly got divorced, and I say that because I had one vision and my ex had another vision when our kids left for college. I
Right.
have a 24-year-old and a 22-year-old,
Awesome.
and, this was 4 years ago, so my youngest had just graduated from high school and left for college, and my husband asked me for a divorce, so I wasn't expecting this.
Okay.
I had visions of, reconnecting and going off into the sunset and global travel again and our empty nest time together.
Yeah.
What I realized, and at first it was very tempting to go into a lot of victim thinking and thinking, okay, like this was unexpected. Oh, what do I do now? I'm too old to start over. I was 49, which is part of the reason that drove me to help other women because it's so not true.
Yeah.
Um, we're so young and so ready to start our lives at this point. But it it was difficult and took 3 years to get through. I focused on what I could control, which was my mental health and my wellness journey, and I really had to take a hard look at my contributions to the divorce, which I have great respect for my ex. I've had to build that back up over time because of my own, again, sort of victim thinking and
Mhm.
thinking, oh, this happened to me. But where I take responsibility is as a result of sort of taking a break from some of these therapies. I I grew up into an adult very in emotionally distant. I now know that I am I have anxious avoidant
Mm.
tendencies in relationships. And so I brought a lot of my adaptive and coping mechanism behavior into my marriage.
Okay.
I knew as a kid that I would break a cycle, a generational cycle. I just had that grit part of
Yeah.
me for our children, and we had that in common. We were really good parents together. But, yeah, I was lacking in that emotional intimacy. And that's something that we've helped to heal and talk about since our divorce was final a year and a half ago.
What you said is so profound on so many levels. One of the hardest things to do in a situation, especially like where I like felt like a victim, was to take responsibility for my part. That
Yeah.
is that's where the growth happens. That's when you kind of really put it down. We do it in AA, you put down your character deficits and kind of like for the first time look at it on paper and be like, okay, what can I do? Compared to avoid, deny, avoid, deny, avoid, deny. It's important to turn that looking glass inward because those are a lot of things we can control while we may not be able to control what the other person's going through at this point. At least now I'm aware and I can look at these things, and that takes so much maturity and responsibility. That is amazing, Heather, that you were able to do that. I hope everyone is as inspired as I am hearing that because that is growth. That is maturity. That is that's taking it on just straight on, instead of just being like, this wasn't my fault. It's not my responsibility, all this kind of stuff. No, you looked inwardly. That's huge.
Easy. That's easy, Cam. It's so
Yeah.
easy to say it's not me. It's not. It's really, really hard.
Yeah.
Let's face it, it takes courage. Let's call it
Hmm.
what it is to say, I had a part in this, and here's what it is. And it's integrity to me. Like, I had my dad's adopted grandfather was a World War II vet, and he was one of the adults that was sort of I really looked up to
Hmm.
as a pillar of someone who had integrity, and he had that courage. And I just really wanted to it does take maturity and time, but it's part of growth.
Yeah.
Ostensibly, I was, thriving. I was, doing well in work. I was, my career was better than ever. I lost 90 pounds. I did all of this strength work. I transformed my body. I was eating healthier. So
Awesome.
everybody thought I was fantastic, great. And I really had to take a hard look
Hmm.
at, like, how am I really feeling? And a lot of that grief was delayed
Hmm.
because I was so busy, busy, busy. And I have also recognized that's a coping mechanism of mine is to stay busy so I don't have to deal with things.
Yeah.
It's the avoidant part of me.
Wow. And another word you said was time. I know that's a hard answer to hear, but time does help. It kind of gives you either like, it just gives you more distance from it. And you can kind of like feel it a little less and see it a little more. And as you give yourself that grace, you're kind of like working that angle out. And before you know it, you have more of an overhead view where you're not feeling the because when you're in the situation, it's hard to make good decisions. Like I use the
I get
analogy.
it.
Yeah. Like if I'm on fire, I'm not going to be able to take your instruction as well, compared to like in a course prior to a fire, this is what you should do. Right. It's just not going to work in that moment. I'm on fire. But when you get a little time and people are trying to help you, and you may hear the same thing like 10 times, 100 times, but for whatever reason, with time, with work, on that 101st time, you hear the same thing, but it hits different because
It
you're
does.
finally ready and mature enough to accept that part. Because it's like it's just growth kind of takes time, and as you get farther away from it, you're able to kind of like go, "Wow, that I didn't see that in that moment." And the other thing you can do from an overhead view is you can sort of connect the dots. You can be like, I guess it does make sense that this person will be doing this if they experience this thing at this age. And then this happened. And then, yeah, that's the way I would do it. I would look at it as like another person, be like, that makes sense that this person would do that because blah, blah, blah. And then be like, well, can you
Logical.
yeah,
Yeah.
could you give yourself that grace though? And I'm like, I don't know.
Mhm.
I
A lot of I know it's hard and a lot of people don't get there.
Yeah.
A lot of people I've seen with divorce, they say stuck in the story, which keeps them stuck in anger. And
Mhm.
the story becomes actually convoluted as time goes on. And as their ex moves on, and sort of, especially when starting another relationship, if you don't do the work, you're going to be stuck in that anger. And it's just going to keep you stuck in the story of your tragedy or divorce.
Yeah. Yeah. Man, for whatever reason, I like to chew on resentment. That's all I was doing for like
Mhm.
the first like 8, 9 years, just chewing on resentment,
Absolutely.
but it's exhausting. And it's
Yes.
actually destroying yourself as you're doing it. It almost gives you a false sense of control. Like if I'm angry
Mhm.
and I just,
Oh, yeah.
it kind of makes you feel better momentarily, but in the long run, it just kinda drags it out, and you're talking to someone who I there are some people I would say I hated for a long time, um, and I realized one day, not only is it exhausting, but I'm going after another human being. I'm not perfect. This person isn't perfect. And then like the maturity comes in and you start realizing that without this person, you wouldn't have learned what you learned. Although it may have been a bad thing you learned. It's okay. Well, I don't want to be that person. Thanks for modeling that for me. I'm not that person. I get to move forward, compared to being stuck under their thumb the whole time or feeling like they
Right.
still have control over you. I mean, we've all heard the analogy of the drinking poison and hoping the other person dies. But, what was interesting for me with the resentments is when it finally broke for me. I don't know how it happened. It was kind of like an aha moment. It finally broke, and I noticed I was like, "Oh, I'm not angry today." And I was just running on anger all day. I thought it was over. I was like, "Oh, PTSD is done." What was actually happening was all those resentments left the room, if that was my head, and all these emotions that were behind the resentments came
Oh, yeah.
flooding in memories from years and years and years ago that had been waiting to be felt because they couldn't be felt until this was felt or understood. And it's just like, so you're right. It's an ongoing process. There's going to be waves, there's going to be highs, there's going to be lows, but you're working towards freedom. You're actually working towards not
Oh,
only,
yeah.
yeah, like you're working towards freedom. And then once you get on the other side of it, you're like, well, I know there's other people who are going through this, and you start pouring into
Yes.
those people like you have. So tell me about that. How did you suddenly like come up with the idea to help women who are going through this situation? And what kind of people are you working with? Like, how
Yeah.
do people come to you?
Yes. So as I mentioned, I've worked globally
Hmm.
through my career with international exchange, with scholarships, foreign governments, our US government. And it's been a thrilling career. I've traveled all over the world. My second language is Spanish. I love, love, love my favorite continent is South America, where I studied.
Awesome.
And it was my life's purpose for at least 20 years of my life. When I went through my divorce and then owned my own stuff and got my life together, I started to really see the clues around me of women going, I'm too old to start over. I started doing research. I wrote a book about it. Like, people, there are more entrepreneurs over 50 than any other group, especially with women.
Really?
So, yes, I started really realizing I've always felt a divine, like, protection my whole life. And it absolutely, I felt this calling of like, this is what I'm meant to do at this stage of my life. I'm 52. I know that globally, that's my place. I'm on a global stage, is to help women redefine their futures and transform their lives. Midlife transformations, whether they've been through a divorce or a difficult transition. Um, and I saw this as a glow up, a holistic life glow up.
Okay.
Whether you're, it's a transition to go from a making decisions between 2 people, to say that lightly, financial decisions,
Right.
decisions about your children, and going to head of household. So transitioning and recovering from that, and then really embracing your life and rediscovering your purpose for this phase of your life. That's what drives me and gets me up every day. And I started my business and I haven't looked back. I am thrilled to be here and to connect with women in every way. I have master classes, I have my book, I do individual coaching, and all of that vision led me to pursue my divorce coaching certification.
Wow. That's awesome. I can only imagine. I've actually not been through a divorce, but I can only imagine how devastating it could be, for in that moment, you've got a vision of what's to come and it just kind of gets yanked out from underneath you. I would have a tough time probably based on like my trauma in the past. Like I would have a
Yes.
tough time not blaming myself. You know what I mean? Because that's typically what happens to people who go through trauma. They blame
Absolutely.
themselves. So how would how would you redirect a person to stop thinking of themselves as a victim, and how could this happen to moving in a direction, whatever direction that is? Because there's a want to sit idle, a want to
Yeah,
just like sit down in the
absolutely.
mud and just be like, well, I don't care anymore. I'm not going anywhere, blah, 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 you know, whatever. So, how do we get someone to go from that victimhood to moving in a direction on that first step or first couple steps?
I want to absolutely acknowledge something that you said, which is stuck in the mud. And you were mentioning before the resentment that you used to feel.
Yeah.
And resentment and anger absolutely are synonymous with being stuck in the mud. It will drive you, it will keep you from growth. And as you mentioned too, it covers up all of your emotions.
Mm,
It will keep you stuck to your divorce story, to your transition, to the death of your spouse, whatever transition you've gone through.
hmm.
Have to start healing and get to know your own nervous system. When we're going through a divorce, we're often in fight or flight. You're not actually using your frontal lobe to make decisions.
Right.
So we make decisions from a place that is dysregulated. So getting to know, not only taking your responsibility for things and getting the help you need, therapy for things that you haven't dealt with. As you said, this can compound any of the, old wounds that you
Hmm.
haven't dealt with, traumas. I even, in my divorce, I always came from a place of fear and made a lot of decisions that were short term, that had long term impact,
Mm,
that absolutely are still messing with my life right now.
yeah.
Um, so the thinking and being able to, that all comes from your nervous system,
Hmm.
being able to think rationally again. But you've got to get the help you need. You've got to take an honest look at your life and if look for those glimmers of hope, look for the beauty in the world and any connection, look for an inspiration, look for someone that um I'm not sure if you've heard, of To Be Magnetic? It's,
No.
a complement to my therapy. It's a program that is reminds me of Gabby Bernstein's work.
Okay.
They have a podcast, and they have, a reparenting program where they help you remove blocks to more positive thinking, and they talk about beauty, and they talk about connecting with your inner child and things, and
Yeah.
it's just an interesting way to think of the world. But just some suggestions. Gabby Bernstein also talks about manifestation and
Cool.
finding those inspirations in your life, knowing contradict what's in your head. I'm too old to start over. Look for someone who's not.
Yeah. Yeah, I like it. I like it. It definitely helps because you see someone else is doing it and you're like, "Oh, I just have to walk that direction. Okay, I can do that for a
Exactly.
little bit." So, it makes it more manageable. Um, yeah. That's that's tough. That's tough that, you know, in just a split second life can change. And one of the things I had to come to terms with is no one's going to fix my situation but me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then it's whose responsibility is it to fix my situation? It's mine. And that's tough when you're in a victim state because you feel like it's happened to you, that it's not your fault, it wasn't my choice, it's not my problem to fix, but it actually is. And it not fixing it, maybe to handle, to take on, instead of just ignoring it and hope it disappears or someone else fixes it because it's just going to stay there until you kind of look at it and see what it is. We talk about I heard a saying one time like fear looks like a lake that's a mile wide and a mile deep, but when you take your first step, you realize it's 2 inches deep all the way across. So it's what's going on in our heads compared to the reality. It's so funny how much power is between our 2 ears just in the way we think, because
Yeah.
you can
Mhm.
change your life just by walking outside, and instead of looking for, "I'm gonna see all the bad things today," I'm gonna try to see one good. Your day will change because you're visually actually seeking the good compared to confirming the bad. Having one of those days where you're like, "Oh, of course. Of course life sucks. Of course that
Absolutely.
happened." Yeah.
Of course. You look for evidence to confirm it.
Yeah.
That of course something bad happened. And like you said, Cam, when you change your thinking, you look for evidence to confirm that too. You see the rainbow instead of the pile of mud next to you.
Yeah.
So your brain and your that is your nervous system. Your nervous system will find it's trying to keep you safe. So fear, when you relate fear to something familiar, it's gonna try and keep you safe, whether that's negative and impacting your life in a negative way. You
Yeah.
have to expose yourself to new experiences and expand your realm of thinking. But you've gotta do the work, bottom line. You've gotta start with your therapy,
Yeah.
and, you've gotta get vulnerable.
I think maybe we've got this idea that I think I'm maybe did or maybe sometimes still have. It's like the idea that when you're an adult, growth stops. Like you reach adult and that's like the achievement, but really growth never stops. The only way it stops is if you make it stop and you're just like, I'm sticking
Exactly.
right here. It's like when, like, your parents are wearing clothes from, like, 2 generations ago, but they just won't get the new stuff because they like what they have anyways, you know what I mean? So, it's like they're like, "Well, why am I changing? I like what I have." But it's a little dangerous to do that with your mentality because everything's changing so often and, you gotta learn, and once you get in that flow, of growth, it's addictive because it's like it leads to this and it leads to this and it leads to more growth. And yes, it shakes things up sometimes because your reality can shift, but then you're like, oh, well, That's a good thing. I'm growing through this. I'm learning through this, and now I can see things I couldn't see. Uh,
You literally, as you said, you see things you didn't see, and I often say I have peace in my life that I never knew before, and
mhm.
that's a new thing, and I'm
Yeah,
52. So, that's because I discovered through continual work, coaching, therapy, some of these mindset meditation, it's a holistic glow up process.
yeah,
Glow up your life, inspire people, be inspired. Like, to find a peace that you're not a victim or the universe actually is looking out for you, that spirit or God or whatever you call your higher power, if you believe in that, is is out to protect you. That's an incredible piece if you get
yeah,
to that point, but it takes development.
yeah. It even takes coaching how to live your own life. For some reason, when I was like kind of stuck in my victimhood, I was imagining how other people must be looking at me. And it seemed that
Right.
that voice was really, really loud. And
Yeah.
then something changed one day where I was like, why am I thinking for the people who aren't helping me? Like, why am I not focused on my story? And it almost felt selfish at first. Like, am I being selfish?
Mhm.
But then, they tell you when the oxygen mask drops on the airplane,
Mhm.
you got to put it on because it serves no purpose if you don't put yours on first and then you pass out and now your child can't have it. Like,
Mhm.
yes, you want to put it on your child because you love your child, but you'll both die if you don't take care of yourself first. So it's interesting how we can put ourselves second compared to how we think somebody sees us and how that can become almost like uh a roadblock. It can become like, well, they've already decided I'm a screw up. Of course, and you go into that of course mode. I'm having bad days. Of course, bad
Right.
things. It's meant to happen. Of course, of course, of course. And it's a little hard, but when you get to the point where you're like this, like basically screaming in your head, this is my life. This is my life. My life. My life. And that has two things. One is I get to choose, but it's also my responsibility. So, there's two things that come with that because when you don't have to choose and it's not your responsibility, it almost feels like you're not carrying as much weight, but nothing's changing. But you've got to make the change. And then, yeah, that sort of stuff.
Yep. Nobody's coming. Nobody's coming knocking on the door, coming
Y-
to
yeah.
make the change for you. There's no one on the way.
Nope. Nope. Unfortunately, that's the way it goes. We say, well, there's a lot of talk before it all happens, but it's,
Oh,
when
yeah.
when reality hits, it's kind of like, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, it kind of falls within that close inner circle of how it's gonna be handled, and you hope and pray from the outside that they're okay. But, yeah, I think
Correct.
about that too. Do I show up for people the way that either they've shown up for me or I hope they would have shown up for me? So, that's an ongoing process too. How can you be helpful to the person who's suffering? And it's
Yeah.
and it's usually not just taking all the answers and jamming it down their throat. It's kinda getting in the shit creek with them and just sitting next to them.
Yeah. Exactly. Right. And sometimes they still push you away
Yep.
until they're ready.
Yep.
It's not going to happen.
I did it. I did it 100%. I was like, "What do you
Yes.
know? What do you know? Like, how can you tell me?" And
Mm-mm.
then
You don't understand my pain.
yep,
Right.
right. Yes, that will work for everybody else, but not for me because my
Right.
pain is different. And yeah, I've been very guilty of that. So all your info for people to reach out to you is going to be in the bio. Okay. So everyone listening, check out the bio, reach out to Heather. She is here to help and we want to help grow her community. Like she's going to help grow our community by sharing her story. Um, if you had one gold nugget to say to someone who's sitting in the mud right now, what
Yeah.
what would it be?
Do the work.
Do the work.
I absolutely encourage you to do the work. Open your eyes and search for evidence to the contrary of what you normally do. If it's, of course, it's a shit show, I'm in Schitt's Creek. Well, of course, it's going to be something positive,
Hmm.
and just look for that one sign of hope,
Yeah.
and it can carry you far. And you've
Yeah.
got this, you've got this, you've got this.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Heather, for sharing your story with us and helping the people who are listening.
Thank you, Kim. It's been a privilege. Thank you for your trust and sharing all of your story with me as well.
Of course. Of course. Thank you so much. If there's one thing that I hope you take away from this episode, it's that healing isn't always linear, but it is possible. Whether you're navigating a divorce, working through old wounds, or facing a season of change, keep doing the work. Keep giving yourself grace and keep taking the next right step. If this episode resonated with you, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you're new here, I'd love for you to subscribe to Shit Creek Survivors, where every week we share real stories of resilience, the paddles people use to get out, and hope for anyone stuck up their own shit creek right now. Until next time, keep paddling.